Let's open in prayer, please. Gracious Father in heaven, give us some time in the Word today. We understand that we want to talk about the philosophy, we want to talk about the examples, but let all of those only be a means to lead us to the Word, and the Word to lead us to Jesus. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
So we left off last week with the parable of the jeweler's daughter. And I said a whole bunch of like semi negative or things about my wife. And then out of guilt, I ended on this last slide that was just heaping praise on her. She's absolutely the most wonderful person in the world. So that's where we left off last week. Now, the reason that's important is, unlike the first class, in this session last week, I did get to the anecdote of this idiot hitting on my wife, right? Propositioning my wife. Because we're gonna come back to that fellow here in a minute. So I just wanted to remind you of that anecdote. Today, we're gonna talk about one of Girard's titles, I see Satan fall like lightning, and where that falls out in the scriptures and what some of the corollary scriptures are around that. And why would he pick that out as a title to a book? Out of all the Bible verses that are available, why would he choose that one? And we'll talk about that. But the ultimate goal today is to get to the point where we can adopt the idea that the ultimate mentor is Jesus. So today we'll be talking about the slide that we used in session 2, which is the mimesis of rivalry, and the fact that it occurs between mentors and apprentices. And we'll spend some time talking about that and why it's important. It'll take a minute or two, but eventually we'll get to the biblical version. And I think that'll make sense then. And so that's the biblical version of this is the reading I asked you to do, Dwayne. So
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
And I hope it makes sense. If it doesn't, we'll talk about it. So apprentices start off on the left side of the chart, and they have some sort of handbook or some sort of rules they can follow, and with a little help they can get from apprentice to journeyman. Journeyman being someone who can get the job done, right? Don't do anything extra, anything special, but they're very valuable folks because particularly in the crafts, these are the people that do most of the work. Well, on the far end of the scale, there's the master craftsman who not only knows how to do the work, but knows how to do it better, faster, cheaper, all the things that are valued in a business, okay? So there's a distinction across there, and most people or most professions have a mentorship role, and they highlight that role. They highlight that role because that is what takes you from your basic learning to come up to be of the same skill level as the master who is already there. And I can't think of any serious profession that doesn't have some version of this. So again, this is the basic mimesis model from Girard, and we're just applying it here. I can use my own example. I will use my own example that when I was at Los Alamos National Laboratory, after 26 years in the Air Force, I knew a lot about nuclear security. I mean, a lot. Rank wise, I was a full colonel, if that means anything to you. I wasn't a lieutenant colonel. And we know full colonels are pretty cool. This is a side conversation we had earlier. Side conversation.
My
So-
nephew is becoming a,
Huh?
my nephew is being honored with becoming a full colonel, right?
Excellent.
Wow.
He must be a fine guy.
Flies the C-130s and is the deputy manager of the base, what is it in Georgia?
Nice. In Georgia?
Yeah.
Valdosta, Georgia? Maybe Moody.
Moody, not Moody.
Okay.
It's. I can't remember,
All right.
it's gonna come back, but he loves it there.
Yeah, great.
So, yeah, it's great to be a lieutenant colonel.
So, when I was first promoted to colonel, it's a transition point from field grade officer
Oh, yes.
to senior officer. And it entails a whole lot of responsibilities that are, as much unwritten as written.
Valdez,
Okay. Sounds good.
yep, keep going, I'm listening.
All right, so, I had a very senior colonel in my, he wasn't in my chain of command, but he was the deputy to my boss. And he took it upon himself to help me not make mistakes. So I was just on the verge of being a master craftsman, and he was gonna get me over the finish line.
Yeah,
And so for a number of years, he did just that, and I was enormously appreciative of his guidance at that point in my career. Well, when it came time for me to retire, he had already been retired, I think, 4 years. Sometimes I have trouble with my timelines, but I'm gonna say 4 years. So sometime. And he calls me up and says, "Are you retiring?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And he says, "Well, you need to come and work for me at Los Alamos National Laboratory. Because we need somebody here who knows what they're talking about." And whoever they had then, wasn't filling the need. So I went and worked for him. I mean, I went straight from the Air Force to Los Alamos National Laboratory.
congratulations, wow.
Yeah, it was a good transition. It was good.
But to have your job already, somebody chasing you is quite a kudo.
Yeah, it beats the opposite, which would be looking for a job after you retire.
For sure.
Yeah, no, it was good. Plus, it was in New Mexico, and we already had a home here in Albuquerque, so hey, it was great. So, and I'm working for a guy that I already know and respect. Well, it turns out he was biding his time to become the director of safeguards and security. Now, this is a pretty big job. So the fire department works for you, emergency operations work for you, hazmat works for you, a huge guard force works for you, all sorts of security specialties work for you. Depending on the year, I get these numbers mixed up too, but let's say well over 600 people, probably over 700 people working for you, and well over $100 million a year budget. A lot of money, a lot of people, big responsibility. But this guy was up for it, and he was the heir apparent because he'd been there a few years, and we had a selection committee come around and solicit names for people to be in there, and they came into me to my surprise and said, and it really was a surprise, said, "You need to apply for this job." And I said, "No, my boss has already applied." He said, "No, you need to apply." And well, I went and talked to Gene, my mentor. I said, "What's that all about?" Because I didn't know the lab. They said, well, it's the University of California rules. You gotta have 5 highly qualified people before you can make a selection.
Okay,
So they were, like padding
Oh, yeah.
the pool,
right,
or that's how I interpreted it.
can't work unless you have the,
Yeah, they couldn't follow their own rules unless
Right.
they had, whatever it was. Will you pick up one of those sheets there for him? So they came around and my guy, the fellow I'm talking about, was not selected.
oh, really?
No, we were all called into the deputy lab director's office and we were given, the news, good, bad, or otherwise. So I went up there to get my rejection slip. And the Jim Jackson was the deputy at the lab at the time. A name lost to history, I think now, but Jim said, you've been selected as the new.
Oh,
Uh-oh.
no. Oh, no.
So I go back and I find the non-selectee, well, one of them, Gene Tucker. And I said, what happened? He said, I don't know. Well, I had not a lot of time to piece that together because I had to get to work on my new job. Now, this was awkward to say the least.
Yeah.
Now the,
But you had the opportunity to go to him before and just challenge your even being on the list.
yeah, I did all this.
He had to
stuff,
know
sure.
that.
No, I had a lot of respect.
No, of course you did.
And, yeah, and that's
That's
exactly
embarrassing.
how it happened.
Yeah.
So, then I asked him, I said, what, are you gonna move on? You're gonna retire? Or what are you gonna do? And he said, no, I'll be your deputy. I said, man, this is gonna be awkward. And it was. So for 6 years, we had to work that out between us. And this is not just a story, it's important to the concept of introducing here. For 6 years, we had to work that out. And we would come up with a real tough dilemma. And boy, trust me, there's a lot at the national laboratories. They come up with all kinds of problems that are almost unsolvable. Particularly when it comes to security versus scientific work.
Wildfire at the fence,
Uh,
the wildfire at the fence.
Yeah, no, that happened on my watch. We'll talk about that next
Okay.
session.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really good example. So there is a lot of times, I would consult him on all the big decisions and he would say, well, you almost certainly have to go this way. And I was thinking, well, I thought we were gonna go this way.
Ooh.
So he says, no, you don't want to do that. You want to go this way. And so I would think about it and sometimes I would go, if I didn't have a real strong opinion, I would say, well, he knows what he's talking about. So by then I had figured out why he had not been selected in those 4 years or whatever the period was. He had burned a lot of bridges.
Oh,
Man, he had made less new friends than he had made new enemies.
Oh, God.
That's why he wasn't selected.
oh,
But that didn't mean his technical advice wasn't good. It was very good.
Yeah.
So then we went through it, and year after year, it was like, he would come in after the smoke had cleared, no pun intended. He would come in and say, I told you so, because I had done it my way, not his. And then other times he would come in and say, hey, that worked out pretty good. I never, in my wildest dreams, didn't think that was gonna work out, so. We managed to hold it together for a long time as a team. It was just an awkward situation, but it got better over time.
well, I mean, the ability to intermingle effectively, I mean, he had to know that it was his own fault, right?
I never crossed that bridge with him. I suppose he had pretty good self-awareness. He knew where he stood, but he also had a
blind
He
spot.
also believed that he was gonna be selected, I'll put it that way.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, what is the double bind? Well, this is something that, Girard has borrowed, and as I recall, he borrowed it from, it's a psychiatry term. And it talks about people who are mentally ill and how they get in relationships with other people, and I guess the buzzword is codependent. You know, they rely on each other, but it's not a positive relationship, you know. It has all kinds of negative impacts. And the way it's explained, or the way I'm gonna try to explain it, is an oversimplification, but just bear with me. So we can say by definition that if you're in a double bind, it's an unhealthy situation. And what this means is you're in conflict with someone else. And normally conflict is solved by a win-lose outcome. Sometimes you can find a compromise or a win-win, people call it. But normally it's a win-lose, and you know, it's either pretty much my way or your way. And this is the relationship I had with this fellow I was telling you about. Sometimes his idea was better and it would win out. Sometimes my idea, or at least my stubbornness, was such that my idea would win out. And there's a lot of nuances to that, because when you're in charge, you can't blame it on your deputy.
Yeah,
I mean, whatever decision gets made, it's your problem. I mean, you own it. So when you don't have the leeway on that end to at least if you're an honest person, you don't blame it on other people, if that makes sense to you. So the double bind is when you get so tightly wrapped up in a conflict with someone that there is no winner. There can be no winner. It's going to be a lose-lose. You've reached a point where everybody's going to lose, and it's just a food fight. There's no winners. There's no outcome that favors both people. That's when you're in a double bind. That's when you've reached the point where you can't resolve it in a positive way. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna talk about one of those here in a minute. The smiling, happy guy up there is me. Actually looked like that when I was a full colonel.
I was
In
gonna
the
say,
United
he's a
States Air
handsome
Force. Yeah, amazingly young.
guy.
And this guy's name was Dale. And Dale worked for me. And he was basically my apprentice, and I was his mentor. The Air Force doesn't call it that, but that's what was going on, okay? This guy was brilliant. We were in the programming business, so we would dream up programs, and then you would go to the Pentagon to get them funded. Well, I would go dream up a program or have my staff do it, and then would go present it to the Pentagon. And I had about a 50-50 record, maybe. And trust me, that's not bad. You know, it's like, you know, the normal result might be 20% or something like that. So we were a highly successful staff unit. We did our homework, we did it well. And he was one of the great contributors. When I couldn't make it to the Pentagon, I would send him. And over time, he outperformed me. Now, remember the first part model where the apprentice becomes the master craftsman. And so now there's a rivalry occurring here about who can do better. And he's doing as well as I did, and in some cases better.
In the presentation, but that's.
Well, he brings back the money. That's what counts.
That's right.
He brought back the money.
But the overall thing is optimizing the structure. You could have had take the advising higher level stuff, which is more controversial. So,
Sometimes rank was important, so they would send the colonel, not the lieutenant colonel.
yeah,
But if it was a technical thing, I'd send this guy, because he would get a better result.
yeah.
He was a pretty good salesman. It turns out he's probably a good salesman for the wrong reasons, but I'll get to that. When I was promoted then, it was only a matter of time before I got shipped out. I had to leave that assignment because my new rank was mismatched to the position. So in the military, you get a new assignment when that happens. And that's what happened to me. Well, this guy was much earlier in his career, many years behind me. And he came to me and he said, man, I got a great idea. Well, I said, yeah, I'll definitely listen, because every time I listened to him, it turned out pretty well most of the time, business wise. So I said, what's your plan? And he said, my plan is to take your position when you leave, like next month. And then I'll just be in that position, I'll get promoted. And I had to tell him it doesn't work that way. I had to tell him that as a field grade officer, he had been a major and now he's a lieutenant colonel. He had never been in a command position. And I said, you're not going to get promoted if you haven't been a commander. And it's not my rule, it's the Air Force rule. I don't know how it is these days. I have no clue, but back in those days, this was a necessary step. There was a command board that met and you were recommended for command or not. And if you weren't, then you probably weren't going to get promoted. Well, he was reluctant to do that. And I said, well, okay, whatever. If you don't do it. So he put his name in, or I did it for him is a better way to put it. And he was indeed selected for a command position. And it was one of the biggest mistakes I have ever made in my professional life. He was selected,
Oh.
and that's what happened.
Oh,
right?
come on.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what happened.
How could you have known that? I mean, when you were working with him as his mentor?
Well, that's part of the story, my friend.
Yeah.
How did I miss that? First of all, let's cover him. He was dismissed. If you're a commissioned officer and you get a dismissal, that is a dishonorable discharge.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
You get no retirement pay. You can't get any health benefits from the VA. As far as the world is concerned, you were never a veteran. This guy had 18 years in the service and it went all down the toilet, all of it, 100%. But look what he did. I think he earned that result.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, it was a big scandal. Or as my grandkids would say, it was an epic fail. I didn't really know how to use that expression, but I checked with my grandkids and they said that would be an epic fail.
Yeah.
So why was it a double bind to me? Well, I was integrated in his problem. You know, I was his previous boss. So I had to own part of this result, and it was not a happy thing. It was initially pretty hard on my reputation, although I got past that. So why could you recommend this idiot to do that? So it was a big problem for me, and
Buzz?
yeah.
I don't remember what the interval is for security investigations, but it seems to me that kind of stuff would have shown up on any security investigation.
After 18 years, you would think so.
It's a 5-year cycle.
It's a 5-year cycle, okay.
But this happened after he was a commander.
Oh, yeah,
After he was
of course.
in the field. And so his downfall was that he wasn't a good person. to say the
Yeah,
least.
yeah,
Okay,
obviously.
he had issues. And they came to light when he was in command, because now he's in charge of people.
Yeah.
And he's abusing his power in many different ways,
Oh, okay.
including sexually assaulting one of his subordinates. Really? You gotta be
But
kidding
none
me.
of this, he wasn't showing any of this type of behavior before. How come?
I'm not saying he wasn't. I'm saying I didn't see it.
Yeah,
Okay, this is why it's my problem, because I didn't see it. If you look at the bottom of the slide, this is that same creep
yeah,
who propositioned my wife.
Well, the other thing is the drunkenness, the alcohol, situation, that also wasn't there no indications of that?
Not that I saw, but
Well,
maybe I wasn't looking hard enough.
yeah,
So here's the issue. When you're at a staff position, particularly a field agency, you only see the people at work.
yeah,
If you're in a unit together, you see them all the time.
yeah.
And then you have a much better sense of who they are as a person. Now, that's comes across as an excuse, but it's true.
Mhm.
It's the way it worked. I don't know, Mark, you were,
No, you're right.
I mean, it's like, if you're in a unit, you would absolutely see that. You go to a softball game and this guy be over there slobbering drunk, in the middle of the game. You'd say, hey, I don't know,
Yeah.
what's up with that guy? You don't see that, if you're in a staff position, where you're not exposed to, everybody goes home at night, you're never gonna see anybody, and if you don't socialize this. Well, this is the same guy that I found out 12 years later
Wow.
had hit on my wife, propositioned my wife. And I'm gonna drag my wife back into this right now. When he decided that he could get away with taking liberties with my wife, which he didn't get away with. He had cornered her at the 40th birthday party for his wife, which is just, that's
Oh,
obscene,
that's
that's obscene in its own right. It's crazy. And he goes up to my wife and I don't know, I wasn't there, but basically he says, let's break the sixth commandment together. It will be a lot of fun. And she says, no. And he says, well, that's not possible because there's no woman in the world who could turn me down. He's a narcissist, obviously,
Yeah.
And so he says, I can't believe she said no. So he says, it must be a logistical problem. So his counteroffer is, we'll wait till Buzz is out of town. And we'll go up and meet at a hotel in Santa Fe. So that way, whatever your concerns are, that would be it.
Yeah,
Of course, that wasn't her concern.
yeah.
That was his concern, not hers. Who's got Matthew 18, 15, 17?
I don't think I do. Looking for it.
Good.
Yes, of
Okay,
course, it's at the start.
okay, go ahead.
If your brother sins against you, go tell him his fault
yeah.
between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you have won your brother. But if he won't listen, take one or two others with you, so that by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, every fact may be established. If he doesn't pay attention to them, tell the church. If he doesn't pay attention even to the church, let him be like a Gentile tax collector to you. Truly, I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will have been bound in heaven.
I
And
think you're up
whatever-
to verse 18 now.
I'm sorry?
I think you're up to verse
Yeah, that's
18.
Yes.
That's okay.
Oh, okay. Shall we keep going?
No,
No, that's-
All right.
we got the point. Excellent, thank you. So I don't know where she got the term, but it's not a Lutheran term, but my wife always called that passage there the Matthew Code, named after the author of Matthew. So when this guy did this ridiculous proposition to my wife, she took step number one and she said, no, that's wrong. And he persisted. So at that point, I didn't know this until the other folks revealed it later, 12 years later. My wife's, when he said, well, I mean, I'm gonna go to Santa Fe, whatever his stupid idea was. My wife said, oh, let me think about that. And she left him and went over and got her best friend. My wife's best friend. She said, come with me. And they went back together. Okay, so that's number two in the thing, right? She's bringing a witness and they're both confronting him now. And that's the part where she tells the story about Sharon, my wife, turning a blowtorch on this guy and just roasting him, roasting the skin off of him. So, and he had it coming. So she never got to step three. So what's the double bind for my wife? What's the double bind for me? The double bind for me is pretty simple. And you pointed it out. To this day, I think I should have caught that behavior.
She didn't tell you about it?
No, she didn't tell me till 12 years later.
Why?
Because I would have done something stupid. Number one, and number two, that other point was she could take care of herself.
I saw that on the slide and I thought this whole story must have been going.
That was her whole thing was,
Yeah.
I've been fighting off creep since I was 15 years old. If I needed your help, I would ask.
You married, fight the
I think those are all, well, she
Dude, sounds like an Air Force person married a Marine.
So on my behalf, I missed the behavior when I was in a position of authority.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to forgive myself for that. What was my wife's double bind? She was wrapped up with this guy and she was in this fight and she was determined that the win-lose was gonna be in her column. And there's no question it was gonna come out that way, no question at all, okay? Well, what happened? What happened is he wasn't revealed for what he was. Because had she gone to step three, her idea of step three was not going to the church.
Yeah.
Because this guy was unchurched for sure. Her idea on step three, the church would have been, she would have gone his wife and me.
Yeah.
And that would have been the church right there. And there would have been a.
Come to Jesus.
We could, if that's not sacrilegious, I'll say it. That would have been a come to Jesus meeting. And all would have been revealed.
Yeah.
But that didn't happen. She got him to back down, she got him to apologize, she got him to walk away with his tail between his legs. And in her mind, it was finished. However, what about that lady a couple of years later?
Yes.
Who was
Right.
sexually assaulted?
Right.
Had she pressed the case, maybe that would have happened.
Yeah.
So I love my wife, I love myself. In a good biblical way, but boy, we both missed opportunities to put this jerk where he belonged. Let's find some more of this in the Bible. 1 Samuel 18, 6 through 30. This is a good long reading.
Yeah, it is. So as they were coming home, when David returned from killing the Philistine, the women came out of all the towns of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with songs of joy and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they made merry. Saul has killed his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul was very angry, for this saying displeased him. He said, they have ascribed to David 10,000, and to me they have ascribed thousands. What more can he have but the kingdom? So Saul eyed David from that day on. So it looks like it fits this case. The next day, an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre, and as he did day by day. Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul threw the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall. But David eluded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of 1,000. And David marched out and came in, leading the army. David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw that he had great success, he stood in awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for it was he who marched out and came in leading them. Then Saul said to David, here is my elder daughter, Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul thought, I will not raise a hand against him. Let the Philistines deal with him. Saul said to David, who am I and who are my kinsfolk? David said to Saul, who am I and who are my kinsfolk? My father's family in Israel, that I should be a son-in-law to a king? But at the same time, when Saul's daughter Merab should have been given to David, she was given to Adriel, the Maholathite, as a wife. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David. Saul was told, and the thing pleased him. Saul thought, let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, you shall now be my son-in-law. Saul commanded his servants, speak to David in private and say, see, the king is delighted with you, and all his servants love you. Now then, become the king's son-in-law. So Saul's servants reported these words to David in private. And David said, does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and of no repute? The servants of Saul told him, this is what David said. Then Saul said, thus you shall say to David, the king desires no marriage present, except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged on the king's enemies. Now Saul planned to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. When his servants told David these words, David was well pleased to be the king's son-in-law. Before the time had expired, David rose and went, along with his men, and killed 100 of the Philistines. And David brought back their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. Saul gave him his daughter Michal as a wife. But when Saul realized that the Lord was with David, and that Saul's daughter Michal loved him, Saul was still more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy from that time forward.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
This is really a good comprehensive reading. It shows
Yeah.
the apprenticeship relationship. It shows the rivalry developing. It shows the jealousy of the king. I mean, he was the king and he was jealous of his position. He felt it slipping away because the folks like David. So you see all that, you see the violence and the sacred in delivering the foreskins of the Philistines. A different way of scalping people, I think. Pretty brutal stuff. I mean, the part of Gerard's point is, if you want violence, go to the Bible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there. So it's got all those components that we've been talking about in a single vignette, in a single story about the rise of David and the jealousy of King Saul. Any questions on that? I mean, it's just a
How does
good.
that relate to your wife?
Listen, My wife was not involved in this.
She should have brought back the foreskin.
I'm not gonna go.
From Santa Fe.
Guys are tough crowd. Moving right along.
Okay.
Let's talk about a different application of the original model and talk about who is the mentor in the Old Testament. Exodus 20 and then Exodus 34, please.
Okay. All right, Exodus 20:1-17. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath it, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquities of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the thousandth generation of all those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath days and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife or male or female slave or ox or donkey or anything that belongs to your neighbor. That's the Exodus first thing. Do you want me to do the
Sure.
Exodus 34?
34, 1-10.
Exodus 34:1-10. The Lord said to Moses, cut 2 tablets of stone like the former ones, and I will write on the tablets the words that were on the former tablets, which you broke. Be ready in the morning and come up in the morning to Mount Sinai and present yourself there to me on top of the mountain. No one shall come up with you. Do not let anyone be seen throughout all the mountain, and do not let flocks or herds graze in front of the mountain, of that mountain. So Moses cut 2 tablets of stone like the former ones, and he rose early in the morning and went up on Mount Sinai as the Lord had commanded him, and took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. The Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name, the Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for the thousandth generation, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. Yet by no means clearing the guilty, but visiting the iniquity of the parents upon the children, and the children's children to the third and fourth generation. And Moses quickly bowed his head toward the earth and worship. He said, if now I have found favor in your sight, O Lord, I pray, let the Lord go with us. Although this is a stiff-necked people, pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. Now this is through 10.
Yeah.
The covenant renewed. He said, I hereby make a covenant before all your people. I will perform the marvels and such as have not been performed in all the earth or in any nation, and all the people among you whom you live shall see the work of the Lord, for it is an awesome thing that I will do with you.
So what you've just heard is the first and second try of Moses to be the mediator between the people of Israel and following the will of God. The reason it took a second try was when he came down the first time, they were misbehaving.
Already in rebellion.
Golden calf, yeah.
Uh, it was not a good outcome. So he had to go back and do it twice, but it establishes that the mentor of the law in the Old Testament was Moses, period. He's the one who had the audience with God. And that's a very important set of passages to work with when you're looking at that model. Does that make sense to everyone as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, we're gonna move on to John 15. Did I give that to someone? If I did, don't read it. Because I put it on a slide. So here's the culmination of apprenticeship in the New Testament. Now we're gonna put Jesus in the role as the mediator or the mentor. And you can read that for yourself. And we're back to session 1. How fast do you read? 400 words a minute?
It's a beautiful passage. You ought to read it.
Yeah, so when you get to this point, well, I want you to read it. When you get to that point, just make note of the fact that Jesus is saying, I chose you. So this is the point where they're moving from discipleship to being apostles. And on a chart, it kind of looks like this. And I'm going to go right to the footnote. Pastor Mark helped me with this. The disciples that Jesus chose were not traditional. They were totally non-traditional choices. For the Jews, if you're going to choose someone to be in the mix for knowing and reading the scriptures, you would do that at a very early age. So post-adolescence, 14, 15 years old. The rabbis would choose the young men who looked like they had promise, and then they would have them start reading the scriptures under their tutelage, under their mentorship. Jesus took it to a whole different level. He had fishermen, he had tax collectors, he had whatever he was led to do, and he chose those people at a very mature age compared to what the Jewish model was. So Jesus wasn't necessarily following what was understood to be the biblical standards of the day. He was transcending them. He was putting out a new rule, a new approach, if you will. And he wanted those disciples that he had gathered together to become apostles. And so let's see how that turned out. Any questions on the chart? Does that make sense? All right, so we got one longer reading and then 2 corollary short readings. And I believe that's you, Mark.
Yes, sir. Then the 72 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. So he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Look, I have given you authority to tread on snakes and scorpions and on the full force of the enemy, and nothing will hurt you. Nevertheless, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you, but rejoice that your names stand written in heaven. On that same occasion, Jesus rejoiced in the Holy Spirit and said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and intelligent and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this was your gracious will. All things have been given to me by my Father. No one knows who the Son is except the Father, or who the Father is, except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son decides to reveal him. Then Jesus turned to his disciples and said privately, "Blessed are the eyes that see what you see. For I tell you that many prophets and kings longed to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it." Let's see here, Isaiah.
Yes.
Here the quotation is, "Look how you have fallen from the sky, O shining one, son of the dawn. You have been cut down to the ground, O conqueror of the nations." And if you'd like Revelation as well.
Yeah, it's 12:9, I believe, or 8:9.
7 through 9 is what we had last.
Okay, that'll work.
All right, 7 through 9. Then war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But the dragon was not strong enough to prevail, so there was no longer any place left in heaven for him and his angels. So that huge dragon, the ancient serpent, the one called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world, was thrown down to the earth, and his angels along with him.
So now you can see where Girard gets the title of his book, right? That also has embedded in it, that first reading in Luke has embedded in it the other title of one of the other books, Things Hidden Since the Foundation of the World. So you can see how Girard, when he reads the Bibles, brings these thoughts together and uses them to illustrate his points. For us, while he's reinforcing this with his disciples, soon to be apostles, and they are seeing the truths and knowledge not previously revealed. If there's any one overall theme to those reading, it's dominion of truth over evil. I mean, it comes through, and it's probably the reason it's recorded at least 3 times in the Bible, probably more. Those are just the ones that I found in reading. So Jesus is the ultimate mentor. He can facilitate our growth, and you and I hope, would identify as disciples today, right now, or you wouldn't be sitting in a room. We can identify as learners, but we're generally at that stage passive. So you see other folks that move forward and become teachers, or they become active. And by the way, I stipulated in session 1, I am not a teacher, so I'm not putting myself in this category. I'm probably still on the left side of the chart for sure. But I'm saying we can move there just like the apostles moved from discipleship to, is there a word apostleship?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's in my job title.
There you go. So, this is the way, this is why we say Jesus is the way. It's out of the Bible, but it's also, he's showing us the path. He showed us the path by being tempted in the wilderness. Some of the other Bible readings we've had. Jesus imitates the Father. Disciples imitate Jesus. And we turn to the scriptures to find a way to emulate the apostles and to follow Jesus. I threw in on this slide our church's vision statement. And I gave this to my proofreader. Remember, I was kind of making fun of my proofreader in session 1 and having a little, or maybe she was making fun of me, whatever it was. She looks at this vision statement and she says, "That's a very rich metaphor." She said, "That's also a very mixed metaphor." She says, "You got faith and it's a home, but then there's a path, and then it's the Jesus-shaped life, and then there's God involved, and there's others involved, and here's the people we encounter." And she says, I said, "I don't know what to tell you. I was in the room when that was written, and so I've got no answer for you." But it is a great statement to show the latter statement at the bottom, or the answer the question, who shows us the path? Clearly, it's Jesus, and Thomas and Philip asked that very question. Who has John 14:5?
I do. So, starting in verse 5, Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? And Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. Henceforth you know him and have seen him. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and we shall be satisfied. And Jesus said to him, I have been with you so long, and yet you do not know me, Philip. He who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am the Father, and the Father is, that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak of my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, or else believe me for the sake of the works themselves.
So in conclusion, here's what Jesus is doing. He's in that one passage right there. He is transcending everything that came before him. He's pointing out that he is the moderator as part of the Trinity. And he's pointing out that he's the Redeemer and the leader of the leader of the apostles. And he's telling them very clearly that he is the way and the only way on the path to salvation. So his role is quite clear in the text there in the Bible. So that's where we get to the conclusion that the ultimate mentor in any relationship is Jesus. If you're a Christian, that's where you end up. Make sense to everybody? Next and final session will include sacrifice and the scapegoat mechanism. And this will take us right up to Christ's passion and Christ's death and resurrection. And there's a lot of important things to say there. We're going to do a lot of Bible reading next week as appropriate to the subject. But I appreciate you all being here. There is a sheet back there, which I hope you've got, and it's got a collection of online resources that you might choose to read. Some of them, not read, listen to, watch their videos on YouTube. So if you're inclined to do that, it's there. It's just like the book. It's an extra resource. It can help you understand. Look for the ones that where Girard is being interviewed, because then you can hear him say all this stuff in his own words. And you can get a better understanding of, not my interpretation of it, but straight from a horse's mouth, so to speak. Any questions or anything? I'll be around if you have any other questions. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you. Let us go in peace.
There you go.